Hey, what's up, everybody? Good morning. This is Truesdale, live from his living room today. And what you're looking at actually is a setup of two different cameras. My GH5 is actually recording my television screen, and my Sony actually is on right now. It's right beneath me. You can't really see it, but it actually is zoomed in on a stocking and some Christmas decorations. Okay, but the purpose is not to show those things, but the purpose is to show ISO this morning, shutter speed, aperture, and the light meter, and to see what it is that looks like when I start messing with the settings, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and start with what you're looking at here. In the lower left-hand corner of your screen, you're going to notice that is 1/25th. That is your shutter speed. That is actually very, very low. And you're going to notice that when I change that, it's going to change the light. Right now it's horribly underexposed, okay? You might also notice in the lower right-hand corner, with those kind of white squiggly lines, that's called your histogram. And in just a moment, we're going to talk about that, what that does. But let's go back to the lower left-hand corner of the screen, and that is your shutter, okay? And because this is actually being filmed at 24 frames per second, like it says in the text, we want to make sure that that shutter speed is set at twice that. So at 1/24th times 2, 1/48th, or 1/50, with it, whatever the camera does, okay? Notice what that does to the light, all right? Now, notice that when I go even lower, it's going to make sure that it's even brighter, all right? That's even slower. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that it goes to about 1/50th. We can't do 1/48, that's not an option, so we'll do 1/50th. Now notice that when I put it at 1/50th, it's even more underexposed. And that histogram in the lower right-hand corner went totally to the left as far as those white squiggly lines. Now your histogram is very, very important, because what that's going to do is you don't really want to trust your naked eye as to whether or not something is exposed or underexposed or overexposed. You want to trust that histogram. So you'll notice that on that far left, it's saying it's peaking on the left. It's horribly underexposed, which obviously we can see it's very dark. It's not looking really good right now. Okay, it is also a really fairly dark living room. You know, it's a living room, and we don't have great lighting in here, even though it's a beautiful day. But we're going to talk more about that histogram in just a second. Okay, so let's talk about aperture. That is the dial that says f4.5 right now, and that is actually the widest that this lens goes. This is a crop lens called Super 35. It's the zoom lens I showed you a couple days ago. I love the lens. But it's really not the best for low light because it is a zoom. The widest it goes is f4.5. So let's go ahead and see what happens when I make this. It's going to be even worse actually when I try and narrow that aperture even more, which means we're letting in even less light. All right, so 4.5 is the lowest it goes. 5, 5.6, 6.3. Look at that, get even darker and darker. You can barely even see the Christmas decorations. So in low light, let's try and make it as wide and as bright as possible at 4.5. Okay, we're going to try and get this image so it's perfectly exposed today. Now, you're going to notice that light meter right there, that mm, it's set at 1.7. That's not good. Anytime it's a negative number, it's going to be, underexposed. Okay, so that's at negative 1.7. And we still see that histogram is at way in the far left-hand part of the screen. That's not good. So here's what we're going to try and do. When everything else has been exhausted, you've messed your shutter speed, your aperture's fine, and you're still underexposed, what do? Well, we start cranking up the ISO. Okay, and obviously ISO 100 is the very lowest that most cameras can go. There's a few Canons that'll go down to 50, but honestly, that's pretty low, and that's for pretty low light, you know, very, very bright situations, and it's not bright in here at all. So we need to go ahead and crank that bad boy up. So I'm going to go ahead and go over here to my ISO. And notice that I can go to auto ISO, and we're going to see what happens when that does that. I love using auto ISO. It's kind of a time saver. It's not for professionals, but it really does work. And notice immediately it cranks it up to 6400. And let's see what that does to our histogram. See if that's perfect. Look at that. See those bars are not peaking. They should be right there in the middle. It's a little bit underexposed, but it's still looking perfect. That light meter is at 0.0. That means we're almost right where we need to be. Okay, but for all intents and purposes, let's make sure that we're not doing auto ISO, and let's go ahead and start experimenting with some different numbers. Now let's see how much better it gets when you go up and each stop. Okay, each stop means you're doubling the number. So if I'm at 200, if I want to go one stop up, I have to double it. So I'm going to go up to 400. Notice how just that one stop really helps to make it better, but it's still underexposed. All right, so we're going to go back to our ISO, and we're going to keep cranking that bad boy up until it looks better. All right, so it's looking pretty good. A little bit overexposed right now at ISO 800, not bad. See how that kind of went at +1? That means it's overexposed. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to tweak that some more. We're going to take it down a notch. And it's hard to do this because I'm actually doing it upside down here. So let's go to ISO 500. That's still a bit overexposed. All right, so let's go ahead and see what's going to look like if we take it down a notch a little bit. Let's go with 320, see how that looks. Not too bad, not too bad. And we're going to get rid of all this crap out of here. Now, it's kind of interesting that I hit this button because at the very top you can see that the codec we're using, MP4, we're at 1080, we're at 30 frames a second, and my battery's at 75%. Okay, we're getting rid of that crap. All right, we're at ISO 320. Not looking too bad there. I took away the histogram, and we brought it back. Okay, so now we're looking pretty good, a little bit underexposed, but we're very, very close to where we want to be right now. We can see everything's in crisp detail. Now I want to show you what's going to happen if I, unfortunately, in very dark situations, people want to crank up the ISO, and that's normal, but you're going to see how that's really going to affect your image. It looks like garbage. So let's see what happens when I crank this ISO up way too high, and it's super overexposed. Look at the histogram in the right-hand corner, okay? It's way too high, those peaks and valleys on the right-hand side. You'll also notice that your light meter is at plus 2.0. That's horribly overexposed, okay? So again, that looks terrible. So we're going to take our ISO, we're going to go down, and we're going to make sure it goes right back to, I think 400, what it was. Yeah, not too bad. That's looking pretty good there. All right, so shutter speed is correct, 1/50th of a second. F4.5 is the lowest you can go, as wide as you can go on this lens. The light meter is set exactly at 0, ISO is at 400, and we're looking pretty good for this image right now. This would be great to film at if you wanted to capture a great image, okay? All right, so we talked about ISO, shutter speed, aperture, all that good stuff. All right, hope you guys have a great Thursday or whatever day you're watching this, and tune in next time. We'll talk about something else.